Fan experiences are shifting as new sports offerings, new fan bases, and new media solutions are coming to the forefront. Sports teams and leagues need to build their experience to cater to new fans and showcase the latest technology to attract loyal consumers. Yet much is still unknown about what drives fan preferences and how teams can compete with new sports leagues and other competitors for consumer attention. Amidst a shifting landscape, there is a hunger for guidance on meaningful and achievable fan engagement strategies and sports offerings to unlock value and enable future opportunities. Today, we'll discuss how sports teams and leagues are unlocking value by better understanding the end-to-end fan preference. Joining me live from the Consumer Electronics Show 2019 are Amy Choyne, CMO of the US Tennis Association, and Pete Giorgio, leader of Deloitte's US sports practice. Amy, Pete, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great to be here, Hanish.
I think we can all understand the appeal of sports, whether we're viewing in person or at home. But what does fan engagement mean in 2019?
For the USTA, it means a lot of different things because we define the fan for the fan in stadium, on the property, people consuming it on the mobile app who are off property, on .org or via broadcast. So from a fan engagement, we have different techniques and content strategies to engage those fans on different levels. You know, our technology partners that we have across the board are helping us, engage with the fans in different ways in the stadiums, through technology like Hawkeye or interactive maps for grounds to have people navigate the site easier. And, our, online properties not only have great content to consume, but more interactive AI-focused technologies as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because I do think, and the USTA is at the forefront of a lot of this idea that it's not just the fan who comes to the stadium anymore. Right. It is that broad definition of fans of tennis. Right, and how does the USTA as an organization build relationships with those individuals, give content, produce content for those individuals, create a two-way dialogue with those individuals on an ongoing basis, not just 2 weeks of the year anymore or 3 weeks of the year anymore.
3 weeks of the fan week.
Exactly.
Yes.
So, but year round, what does that look like? And so you're seeing more and more organizations like the USTA really take that broader definition and really look at how do we create that year-round relationship.
Quickly to add to that point, what differentiates the USTA as well is the fact that we're the national governing body of tennis. So not only is it the fan experience from watching tennis, but we also want to convert the fan to a participant of tennis and actively, work them into that flow. So it's that engagement as well that we're working on.
Just touching upon what you both said there is, it's not just the event, it's much more than that and all year round. Are there things in place that, as a fan, that can engage me while I'm on the way to the event, not just at the event, but also once I've left the event? So it feels that it's a much more immersive experience and it's beyond just the actual sporting event itself.
Well, we definitely have a robust communication plan when you're getting to the event to prepare them, to give them all the availabilities of, food and beverage and dining and retail to prepare them to navigate the event itself. And then we do a lot of follow-up with them, from a survey perspective to help us learn, as well as, cater new ticket opportunities for them to come back. And then we also try to connect them to other tennis events throughout the year so they could, actively still participate in, watching tennis as well as participate.
I mean, it's interesting because I do think there's a real push to connect, even when you're playing tennis, right? When you're out there hitting with a friend, how does the USTA become part of that conversation, right? How does, I don't know if you guys did it when I was a kid, I was Bjorn Borg, right? Hitting those balls back and forth against the wall. Like, how do we and it's an interesting challenge that Amy and the team has is how do they tap into that as well? Right. And so it's even expanded beyond on the way to the Open and on the way back. It's that broad definition of how they engage.
And we talked a little bit about in person and at home. Is there a totally different strategy for those that are at home? Because obviously it's still not quite the same as being live in person, on the way, coming back, etc. And is that a totally different strategy that, for example, for USTA, what they're doing for those at home?
No, absolutely. I mean, if you're in property, there is the mobile app that you have there, in which we do, push notifications if you're in a certain stadium, as well as leverage our Hawkeye data to give them real-time information of points that are happening on different courts. If you're consuming it at home or on .org, from a .org perspective, about 57% of our viewers there are from the international.
Right.
So, there are content that is catered to geo-targeted areas to give them relevant information, so that is a more personalized experience. And then we work with our respective broadcasters, who people that are actually viewing it at home, to give them content that they are able to use within their programming to not only educate them on the U.S. Open. We had an opportunity last year, for example, that it was the 50th anniversary, so we had a robust content schedule in which gave these vignettes to our partners to for them to integrate into their programming. So it's definitely a catered unique experience for each of those people.
And talking about that experience, how do you think that fan engagement, fan experiences has changed over the years? And what are organizations like yourself and other big sporting providers doing to make sure that fans stay continually connected?
Well, we listen to the fans first and foremost. And, a big significant push that we had, it was our second year, was mobile ticketing. And we worked with Ticketmaster on that, and it actually was able to give us more information about the ticket buyers, especially in the secondary market. From a Ticketmaster standpoint, you have to transfer that ticket, via the mobile app. So now we have more information of the people that are actually in the seats. So we can then, cater emails and push notifications to them to make sure that, we are servicing them. And then from a future perspective, we could, we have surprise and delight, customers for seat upgrades because we know this information. And, a future look is, wait times for concession stands and stuff like that.
Expanding upon that, Pete, I'd love to talk to you about how you're seeing social have a big play in that, and ambassadors for the sport, for the organization, and where that sort of ties in around engagement as well.
Yeah, no, it's been a big part of what Amy's been doing, but honestly, what's happening in all sports. Social is one of the biggest channels for organizations, for athletes, for leagues, for teams, for organizations like the USTA to engage, with people who follow their sport, who are fans of their sport, fans of the event. I don't know if, Amy, you want to talk a little bit about Net Generation, and the USTA, as the governing body, has this great program to engage youth, right? And how do we think about building that next generation of fans? And social is a big part of that.
Yes, I mean, we have a significant social media campaign for both the U.S. Open and the USTA channels. And as Pete mentioned, Net Generation, which is our official youth tennis program for the USTA, we have about 100 Net Generation kid ambassadors that all have pretty robust Instagram accounts. And they post content on our behalf. We have different topics that they need to actually comment on. We actually just hosted them all at our national campus down in Orlando, which is our fabulous 100-court facility for a program with them, and we had them and their parents down to play tennis with player development, to get a taste, and it was a really fantastic approach. And we really found that authentic communication with their audiences talking about tennis is a really great approach, other than traditional media.
Wow. That sounds like you need an adult version for Pete and I to sign up to,
to that point, we are working on that, so stay tuned. Tennis 2020, we have a lot of new adult programming coming out beyond the USTA leagues. I mean, social play is incredibly important to us. Cardio tennis is a great way to get introduction into the sport, and it's something that we're investing heavily in next year. So we're excited to integrate that into our programming and promote it.
One of my favorite things about the USTA, I forget what it is. There's a book in the building at the USTA that every year they have a champion for like the over 90 division or over 85, or like literally like 80, 90-year-old players who are competing in, and the USTA recognized champion every year. So
that's fantastic. And it goes back to what both of you are saying about it's not just the event, right? It's all year round, all ages, that we're trying to get that engagement for.
I want to touch, though, on something that Amy said earlier that I think is important, especially in the social world, which is that she used the word authentic, right? Authenticity. And that's, I think, more and more what a lot of sports organizations are seeing in terms of they need to show up in that very authentic way. when sports organizations first started embracing social, they really just looked at it as another broadcast channel, right? As another way to sort of get information out, get their message out. And what you're seeing is an evolution, and this is a great example. What Amy's doing at the USTA is, how do you really engage with folks at a more basic level, that authentic story, that pulling them into what you're trying to do and make them feel like they're part of it, not just sort of understand who's won a match and what's going on and these different things. And it's something we're seeing across the board.
Yeah, one of the great programs that we had with the ambassadors that worked quite well was the Trick Shot Challenge. And we actually partnered with a lot of the pro athletes, and they did a trick shot video, and then we challenged our audiences via Net Generation to actually challenge each other, and it did tremendously well. Another great thing that we did, leveraging also, because something that's really big that we try to do is we leverage our pro and assets, particularly obviously the U.S. Open, to promote the sport of tennis. And we partnered with Del Potro actually and did a call with a NASA astronaut who happened to be in space. And we did the first tennis match in space, live broadcasted at the U.S. Open last year. So we're really trying to develop this kind of authentic, interesting content that expands the audience of people that not normally would be thinking about tennis.
That's fantastic. And particularly as you're lining up with, top 10 players and pro athletes that, the fans are following those athletes. But then if you lined up as an organization with them, then that's going to be so much more magnified in terms of what you guys are doing as well.
No, absolutely. I mean, the pro athletes, really want to give back, to growing the sport. And, they're a pleasure to work with.
I have to take us to CES because we're here, we're live on the show, and it'd be remiss of me if I didn't talk about all the consumer trends that we're also seeing. So I'd love to get your thoughts on how consumers are actually shaping the way. You talked a fair bit about the technology, what the USTA are doing, but how is we as just fans and consumers actually changing the way that we view and engage with sports, individuals and teams and leagues?
Content is key, and I think that understanding where all of the fans and viewers are actually consuming content and coming up with different original content programs for those respective channels is incredibly important because you have to go where the fans are. Right. Social obviously has been changing the landscape of that, beyond just linear television. And we try to, give them kind of unique highlights and things of quick speed. So, that's incredibly important. And then obviously the, experience in stadium and leveraging, artificial intelligence as well as, plays on court is incredibly important.
I think the other really cool thing, especially in the tennis world, is on the sport tech side, too, in terms of all of the companies that are really doing some interesting things with rackets. With the USTA has a great partner down in Orlando that actually has a visual system that will track balls that are in and out and give you ball speed and things like that. Play site, yes. That sort of really tracks. And so we're seeing a lot of really interesting, and just walking around here, just seeing a lot of different places that are really sort of digging into these different parts. I mean, there's stuff that people are putting in shoes to understand. Is your weight shift correct in terms of what you're doing in terms of, and I think it's interesting to see how all of that is actually going to help you and I, right, become actually better tennis players, right, in a way that we would have to, 10, 15 years ago, we'd have to go get a professional coach to get, right? That is now available in new and different ways, and I think it's going to become even more and more available as we continue to go.
And you think that's permeated down from the pro athletes themselves in terms of them getting that edge and now, as we said, becoming more consumers, so we as budding tennis fans can actually get better playing through those monitoring devices, etc., to see how bad or good our backhand is, for example?
I think it's both, actually. I think we will benefit, but I think you guys are using it a lot with the pro athletes as well. A lot of these new tools as they sort of think about part of what the U.S. and really interesting the USTA does is, in some ways, they take responsibility, maybe not completely responsibility, but thinking about what's the next generation of great American tennis players and how do they participate in that too. So.
No, it's incredibly important to us. And down in Orlando, we have our player development led by Martin Blackman. And, to Pete's point, he does, rely heavily on, analytics and data and, using all of those mechanisms to, understand how to, increase the athlete's performance.
And also that data, even if it's just a fan at home, is immensely useful when in between a set, in between a game, and you're kind of seeing percentage points, etc. And, we're actually starting to see, well, if a certain server got in X% in their first serve, they're likely to win the game. All of those over the years have been phenomenal for just as a viewer as well, in terms of the use of those analytics.
I think it's really interesting too, the all of the fan data that we have now too, right? Not just folks who are at the Open, but just generally. I mean, Amy's got a great database of tennis coaches and kids who play and parents, and does a lot of work to sort of connect all those things. And I think you'll see more and more as that data becomes available, as people understand the importance of that data, folks like the USTA leveraging that to actually grow the sport, to actually use that data, use that information to figure out where and how, there's opportunities to play, to connect people with those opportunities. There's a lot of really interesting things that I think that you'll see in the next few years and how that data gets used to drive that.
It's something that's been incredibly important to the USTA for the last couple of years in our, quest for digital transformation is that holistic, view of the customer, the fan, whether it's the fan, the provider, or the player. It's something that we had limited view of a couple of years ago. So it's, we're heavily investing in it, and we're going to use that obviously to engage, both the fan and participation.
So let's shift gears a little, right, and talk about stadiums. In many ways, in-person events are certainly evolving, right? And when you envision stadiums of the future, specifically, Amy, I'd love to understand what the USTA have been working on in terms of that digital ticketing initiative. And if you could tell us a little bit more about that, I'd love to know more.
So it was about 2 years ago. We partnered with Ticketmaster to get rid of, the traditional ticket. If you're a box seat, you still get the beautiful ticket that we do theme art on because,
right.
I'm a marketer at heart and I would never get rid of that. But, you have to use a mobile ticket. It was a little bit of a challenge the first year, but it was very smooth last year. And with that information, we now know, exactly who the person is, where they're sitting, sometimes even age demographics. And to, Pete's point, eventually we'll probably, know, based on our data lake information, okay, this person plays tennis and their kids play tennis. So we can then cater, the mobile app experience to them while they're, in stadium directly about that, which is great. And then we've been doing a lot of surprise and delights for seat upgrades. And we can give them push notifications right there on their app to, communicate with them. So, that has been wildly successful as well. We have done a lot of fan cam fun activations via the mobile app. And again, we know all this about these people because of the mobile ticket. It really has, opened up that box for us.
So tell me a bit more about just the experience beyond the beauty of the game and tennis itself. What are you doing in terms of just the whole experience for the individual attending?
So the U.S. Open, tennis is one part of it. It's the grandest stage, we like to say, and a spectacular event. Obviously, one of the highest, if not the highest grossing event in America from a sports perspective. When you come on property, you could consume tennis in any way you want. It's, different than going to, one stadium where, you're only in the stadium watching a football game. You can walk around. We have 20 different courts and 3 huge stadiums in which you have access to with your ticket. There's fine dining, there's, fantastic cocktails, there's sponsor activations in which get you onto the court. So, we're heavily promoting that. And then a new initiative that we're working on, the U.S. Open is, from a main draw perspective, a 2-week event. But the qualifying week is kind of the best kept secret of tennis, in my opinion, because it's a free event, and it's the first week, and it's the 4th largest tournament in America, and no one really knows that. So we've rebranded it Fan Week as a give back to our fans, and we are peppering it and have been for the last 2 years, and we're making a more significant push in 2019 with player practices. So you could watch Roger playing for free on the grandstand, or Serena playing in Ash. So, and we're going to have some concert series there, and we're really trying to as a give back to the community, get people there. Obviously, we want them to come back, but it is a significant, important thing we're working on for next year.
It is an experience. I still my very first U.S. Open I ever went to when we first started working with these guys 3 or 4 years ago. I remember standing there And it was I had my back to this fence, and all of a sudden I heard some people playing. I was like, I wonder who's playing, and I kind of look in there, and it was Serena and Venus practicing against each other.
Yeah, you can get really, really up close and personal.
Like just like if I was in like my local tennis court in my neighborhood. So it was crazy.
Excuse the pause. I'm just making a note in my calendar for Fan Week after hearing that. Wow, I did not know about that, but I certainly do, and it sounds like a lot of our listeners are now going to know about Fan Week as well. So that's maybe not the best kept secret anymore.
That's okay with me.
That's brilliant. I mean, that's wonderful. If I think about the engagement you've got for a tennis fan like myself, but all of those things beyond that, what are you doing for those sitting at home, the chair fan? How do they get the personalization? How do they get the interaction viewing the game?
Well, obviously with their, broadcaster and, content that we're partnering with the respective broadcasters on, we, give them behind the scenes of, what's happening at the Open itself, and, work with a tremendous partners in an editing perspective to come up with unique content for them. On, that you can, use the mobile app at home. So, future thinking, you could, have your mobile app and you could say if you're, using it at home versus in the property. Mm-hmm. So it will have a different look and feel. And we, also, .org as well. We have a bot there that you can communicate with and learn more on your own personal kind of questions.
Brilliant. And Pete, your thoughts on that in terms of some of those technologies that you're seeing from an entertainment perspective coming into the home as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think the interesting thing too, and Amy and crew at the USTA do a great job with their broadcast partner just on the streaming front, right? Just that the matches being available. Because the interesting about the Open too is typically you end up focusing on one or two matches a day, but especially in the first week, there's I don't know how many matches.
It's tremendous more.
Yeah, and there's a ton of great tennis. I mean, literally, superstars in the making playing each other. And so getting a lot of the new streaming options, a lot of that content is now available in a way that just wasn't available back in the sort of linear broadcast days, as well as great events like, another best kept secret I think at the Open is wheelchair tennis. Right? I don't know if you ever watched wheelchair tennis.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Amazing. It's astounding. Really I mean, I to be honest, I had nothing against Venus and Roger and those guys, but the wheelchair guys are tremendous athletes. Imagine trying to play tennis in a wheelchair at the same time, right? And all of that is available too in sort of new and different ways. But also, I do think, I think we'd be remiss to, it is about the event. It is about the U.S. Open, but, Amy and crew, they've got, I mean, if you want to find a coach for your kids for tennis, go to USTA. Right, they've got tools and things that you can use to do that, to engage in the game more broadly too, which I think is the really cool part. It's not, the event is a big part of it, but it's also about the game, which is important.
Brilliant. So I want to move to a bit more of a personal note, and you guys kind of touched upon some of that Fan Week and the experience you got with Serena and Venus, but what would you say is your most memorable sporting event?
I'll have to choose tennis, won't I?
But which one specifically?
I'll choose one actually from that actually just happened last year because it was such a fantastic match to be a witness to, which was the Nadal Thiem match, which was a quarterfinal, and it was 5 sets, and the last 2 were tiebreakers. And not only was it fantastic tennis from like watching these athletes play, but afterwards when Nadal won, he literally jumped over the net to hug him. And that sportsmanship was just amazing to watch. And then, from a fan, I was actually in the stadium and everyone, was standing up clapping because of, not only the fantastic match, probably also because it was very hot and they didn't want to sit anymore, but, because, of that great energy. So for me, that is a highlight.
2 years ago, I think it was 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I forget who she was playing, but Madison Keys is a tremendous American female player. She had a match where it was rally after rally after rally. And it was one of the first times I'd actually been to a live tennis event for me. I'd seen plenty on TV. And the sheer power and I hate to say ferocity of these players playing against each other, and the sort of intense focus. I remember it just imprinted on me in a way that I was like, okay, these guys are for real. Like, this is very cool.
Brilliant. So with that, I'd love to thank both of you for coming on to the podcast. This has been incredibly insightful, and for me personally, I'm signed up for Fan Week already for this year coming forward. But I think for our audience, it's going to be really interesting for them to understand so much more about what the USTA are doing just beyond the sporting event itself and the experiences that you can have. So, Amy, thank you. Pete, thank you for being on today.
It was a pleasure.
It was great. Thanks for having us.
Sports and entertainment leaders have long understood the importance of atmosphere and excitement in keeping fans happy and engaged. Fan engagement is central to driving fans to stadiums, convincing them to spend money on their favourite teams and leagues, and developing bonds strong enough to push a fan from their first event to a lifelong attachment. I want to thank my guests Amy Choyne and Pete Giorgio for joining me today. Until next time, happy listening.
The opinions expressed by guests on this podcast belong to them and do not necessarily reflect those of the host or Deloitte.